It was a great event and amazing surprise of Quraysh to hear Muhammad, peace be upon him, calling, I am the messenger of God. I invite you to God and leave idolatry. The Quraysh felt the challenge of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the load of his call, and his danger to its interest and tyranny, and this is how the conflict began. And Quraysh moved to stand in the face of the call and its advocates, and to confront Muhammad. Quraysh practiced all means to toppling and conflict, and the beginnings of its attack on Muhammad and his call were psychological warfare that was represented by mockery and hurtful words. Quraysh didn't use psychological pressure only, but tried to take the method of material temptation as well. Muhammad, peace be upon him, responded to her with the right response, explaining to them his call and message with his enlightened words. Indeed, God didn't send me to gather to the word and desire it, but rather sent me to inform but it and indicated it. When the Quraysh saw that Muhammad was determined to continue preaching and conveying the message, they insisted on their aggression, which increased their harm. So they practiced terrorism, siege, boycotting, and attempts to assassinate the messenger. The Prophet, may God please him and grant him peace, used to meet all of this with a wise patience. If a group of infidels came to him, he would receive them influently, invite them to religion in the best way. If they answered his call, that would be better. Otherwise, he was asking them to come up with that he did from the Quran. They always mocked him and mocked his call, accusing him of witchcraft, insanity, and lying. So he used to exhort them and pray to God for guidance without getting angry. The death of Khadija and Abu Talib was tantamount to demolishing a fortified fortress with two fixed pillars for the Prophet, peace be upon him, in these difficult circumstances. Khadija was the partner of the Prophet in all his suffering and hobbies, and the one who was amused by the harm that befell him. Rather, she was the helper for him in the misfortunes of the Quraysh, and defender and the supporter of the Prophet. That is why the year in which they died was called the year of grief, in which the Prophet's grief intensified and was attacked by the death of his protector and defenders of his call. Was between the 17th and 18th year of the mission. The crisis intensified with the Prophet, peace be upon him, after the death of Abu Talib, because Quraysh was unanimous in crushing the Muslims and crushing the Islamic cause. So it put violent pressure on the Muslims and caused much harm to the Prophet. They tried many times to kill him, but God prevented him from them. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, took the preparation of measures for this gracious surrounding him and the Muslims. With regard to Muslims, he ordered them to migrate to Abyssinia. This plan was completed by deporting two large sects of The Prophet, peace be upon him, was not at the time safe from returning to Mecca in normal manner, so he had to corresponding with some of the rulers of Quraysh and its chiefs, asking them to protect him from Quraysh, and one of them retained him until he came to Mecca under his protection. Finally, the Prophet, peace be upon him, knew that people of Mecca couldn't be the bearers of Islamic message to the horizons because his resistance call that lasted for 10 years didn't find it beneficial at all, and it produced only the insistence of infidels and great stubbornness. He was determined to spread the call among all other tribes, and if he was able to guide one tribe, he would go to it and continue to spread the light of Islam throughout its members. So he began to invite people in the season in which the Arabs used to flock to Mecca for the purpose of worship and trade. So he went to the tribe and said to her, I am the messenger of God to you, and I command you to worship God, and to believe in me, and to believe me, and not to prevent me until I reveal what God has sent to me. Quraysh used to send after him someone commenting on his words by warning the Arabs against obeying him and believing in him. The Arab tribes were fanatic of their alleged gods, and survival affected the tradition of the fathers. The tribes also used to warn the Quraysh that if they entered Islam, they would definitely be subject to the Quraysh war. They didn't respond to the Prophet and didn't accept his claim. However, one tribe responded to the call of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that was the Arab tribe that resided in Yathrib, was divided into sects, Aus and Al-Khazraj, and the war between them was based on the most intense ones. Yes, the people of Yathrib responded to the words of the Prophet and accepted his call. Thus, Islam began to spread in Medina, mean Yathrib, like spread of light after a long night. The pledge of the allegiance to the Muslims of the second city took place with Muhammad, peace be upon him, in Al-Aqaba Bimina in the second year. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, began to organize migration to Medina. So his companions went to Medina one by one, while neglecting the infidels of Quraysh. When the Prophet arrived in Medina, they celebrated a wonderful celebration of his arrival. This was the prophetic migration, which was the beginning of a new life for Muslims, a life of pride and strength, a life of defending their rights, jihad for their enemies. The migration was the beginning of the formation of the Islamic nation, and therefore Muslims took from it the beginning of their religious history, because it was the most important event for them. The responsibilities of the messenger, peace be upon him, were greater in Medina than in Mecca, although the pressure was more, where the messenger wanted to be a nation before building a state. The responsibility to report the non-Muslims, the responsibility to educate Muslims, the responsibility to implement the laws of These responsibilities were some of the serious responsibilities that the Prophet, peace be upon him, took upon himself to fulfill. A serious responsibility. At the same time, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, was leading the Islamic army to the battlefronts, he was recommending them to perform the trust and fulfill the covenant, even with the sworn enemy. At the same time, he was teaching the Muslims their lessons of sacrifice and jihad for religion. He was explaining to them the meanings of forgiveness, the spirit of the peace, and good speech.